All right, everyone. Here is the bonus that goes with our class of sculpted rings. I had originally said to Karen, I thought these were sort of pave, but she corrected me to say it's more bead setting and flat. What did you call it again, Karen? Flush setting, correct?
Yeah, flush setting. So the ones that are just the stones set or would be kind of considered like a flush setting, and then the ones with the little dots that are accenting them are kind of my metal clay interpretation on a bead setting.
I love them both, and I love seeing multiples. It's so great to see that in the colors. All right, so now you're going to walk us through how we can create these beauties.
Sure, so I usually start off by making what I kind of call the beads or the tiny little dots that you're going to be adding to the setting if you choose. And for that, I'm just using the blue tip on syringe, which is going to be equivalent to 22 gauge. So it's really small. And it's so
Yeah,
small because I'm setting 2 millimeter stones. So I'm using the syringe to just create a little dot and I lift straight up. And I don't have cool slip or any sort of lubricant on my work surface. And I'm working on something that I can take off to the heat to dry. That
and
way I don't have to worry about knocking them. Oh,
it
sorry.
looks like it looks like you're holding your hand too steady as you do that. So,
Yes, yep. Bracing my hand to keep it steady. So then for the setting, I always start off by taking a measurement of my piece. And for something like this, I'm just finding half because I want my settings to be along the middle of my ring band. So I take my dividers and set it to the measurement of half and then just drag it along my ring band to translate that measurement. And that's just giving me a guide for where I'm going to be having my center point. And then for the spacing of the stones, you can do some math and be like, okay, I've got 2 millimeter stones and I want a millimeter between them. So center point to that, yada, yada. I'll just set my stones down on their table and then kind of arrange them until I like the spacing and then measure my points of my divider at one collet and the point of my divider at another collet and take that measurement and again translate it to the ring itself.
got it.
So those just give me kind of a center point and a guide to start cutting my seats. And I'm starting off with a very small drill bit and a hand drill, and I'm just making a hole. And that's going to give my stone setting burr a place to kind of bite and keep it on track so it doesn't skid or come off center or anything like that. A lot of times when you're setting stones in metal clay, you want to have an azure, and that's just a hole in the back so you get lots of light to kind of help the stone look extra sparkly. But for stones this small, it doesn't actually matter. And especially if you're repeating this process over and over and over again for a more pave style, you'd kind of be turning your piece into Swiss cheese if you drilled that many
Mm-hmm,
holes all the
mm-hmm,
way through, and you'd
mm-hmm.
kind of be lessening its structural integrity at that point. So I'm not drilling all the way through my piece. I'm just drilling a little kind of notch.
Right. Okay.
And I'm also wanting to point out my finger positioning. I'm kind of supporting the back of my band there. I'm not holding the other side of the band because then it wouldn't be very stable. And if you push really hard, you could break your band when it's this thin. And now I went through and I just erasing the lines that I had created with my dividers. And I'm just using ultrafine and microfine sanding pads to do that. So now I've got those nice little guide spots to start cutting my seat. And you want to use a stone setting burr that is coordinated to the size of stone that you're setting. So I'm using 2 millimeter stones. So I've got a 2 millimeter setting burr in my hand vise now. And I'm just twisting straight down.
Obviously, you want to do that by hand and not attached to a Dremel or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, it would move pretty quick on you. And this is
Yeah.
very much a kind of do a little bit and then check to see how it's sitting, do a little bit, check to see how it's sitting kind of thing. And the whole goal for these seats is to make sure that the girdle of your stone, which is the outer edge of your band, is kind of the largest part of your stone. It divides the pavilion and the crown. You want to make sure that is below the level of your clay.
Right. Okay.
Otherwise, as the clay shrinks, it's just going to pop your stone out. But if
Right.
the girdle is below the level of your clay, it's going to shrink and kind of lock that stone in place.
And that does a quick, easy job. It looks like you're just doing just a few turns.
Yeah, and it's starting to kind of, you can tell here it's getting to a point where it's not cutting as effectively. It's slowing down a little bit. That's just because my burr is getting a little clogged with all the clay,
Ah, okay.
but I'll show it soon. You can use a pick to clean out the clay and then get back to cutting your seat more effectively.
Interesting. Okay, I wouldn't have thought of that. Okay.
It just kind of builds up on it and then it starts not cutting as cleanly, kind of slow. So you just knock the clay out and get back to work.
And that's the best way to clean it, not with like a baby wipe or something.
Yeah, I don't like getting my tools like that
Wet.
wet.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So now I'm looking at my seats and I'm thinking they look pretty good. So I'm going to start placing a stone to kind of check the depth on them. And you definitely want to do this over like a broad table or something. The number of stones that I've dropped in this process that I will never see again.
I was going to ask you that.
But here I am picking it up and making sure that that girdle is below the level of my clay. So once I'm happy with the depth of my seat, I'm going to use water. And this isn't actually attaching the stone or anything like that. But what it does do is keeps the stone in place until it's fired. So otherwise, they just kind of be popping out all over the place if you tried to set them. And then, they'd fall out on the way to the kiln. But just by adding a little bit of water, it softens the surface enough that the stone sticks in that seat.
So it's just a little surface tension, basically.
Yep.
Yeah, those stones have an ability to hide once they fall off the table.
Oh, yeah. And I have a multicolored rug in my studio because glutton for punishment, I suppose.
Yeah,
Because they're just gone for good when they fall on that.
yeah. And they can travel, I've learned.
No, yeah. So for that one, you can see how it popped out. It's because my moisture kind of had evaporated as I was working there. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. That way that'll actually stay in its seat.
I love the color combo across the top.
Thanks. Yeah, they're all obviously fireable in place. I'm working
Mm-hmm.
with EZ 960, and that's going to go up to 1675. So warm colors fire well generally. But I made sure by checking the gemstone guide. And now I'm just applying a little bit of pressure with the flat surface on the back of my tweezers. And that's just kind of, again, making sure we're snug in our seat and sitting nice and flat. And then at this point, if you're just doing the flush setting, you're done. You'd want to clean the stones prior to firing them with some
Mm-hmm.
alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
but your project's done. I went ahead and decided I'm going to add those little accent beads to this one, so I'm dampening the surface of the clay around the stones as well. So I'm bringing back in my dots.
This is working teeny tiny, not just teeny, but teeny
Yes.
tiny.
Yeah, I kept trying to check the camera, make sure it's focusing and everything because it's so small and it's easy to kind of run away with things. And also teeny tiny, get yourself a good pair of tweezers because picking up those little dots is much easier when you have the appropriate tools.
Always. And probably no coffee for this.
Yes. Steady hands.
It does look great, though.
Yeah, and it's not a difficult process, but once it's all done and said, it looks really clean. And it's just by,
Yeah,
making sure your spacing is even and then adding some dots. It's not really a technical thing. It just
yeah.
looks
It looks great.
nice. So, and again, on that topic, these little dots aren't doing anything technically to hold that stone in place. They're just added for embellishment's sake. So if they're not all the way over the stone or anything like that, that's okay.
Yeah, I thought at first they were. So it looks like it's part of it. But it's a great effect.
And you can leave them just the middle. You can play around with putting them on the top and the bottom as well.
This is what all our English friends call the fiddly work.
Yeah, fiddly diddly.
Yeah.
A lot of people comment on some of my posts and pieces. Looks fiddly. But I kind of love this sort of just fiddly, simple, repetitive stuff.
I do too, but I always find you have to be in that frame of mind for it. And when you are in
Yes.
that frame of mind, it's the best.
So there I am adding some to the top too. Just kind of all four corners sort of thing.
And do they fire on pretty consistently, or do you have to like go back in and redo a few after you've fired?
I found that if you wet your surface enough before you put them on, and then once they're attached, I go ahead and generously add some water again.
That
I haven't
does it.
had any
Okay.
pop off.
All right, that's good to know. Water before and water after.
Sometimes they'll kind of scoot on you when you're adding the water.
I see that one. Yeah, that's
This
it's
guy's
fiddly.
getting
It's
away.
definitely fiddly. Pretty.
And just scoot them with tweezers, get them back where you want them with your brush. And then here I am applying that moisture,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of bopping them on the head sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm just gonna let that soak in. So at this point they've dried, and I've actually found the easiest way to clean your stones prior to firing them is to first come in with a pick. If you've done any wet work or anything like that, just kind of scrape the
Interesting.
clay
Okay.
residue off of the face of your stone. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do this with like a soft stone, but I'm not going to be scratching my CZ with that because otherwise you just kind of end up smearing that clay around.
Got it. Okay.
So I'll clean it up first with a pick and then just dab them with the alcohol.
And fired. And what do you usually do when you're firing? Do you have a favorite firing schedule you use?
Yeah, so especially with rings, when I'm working with Easy 960, I do the full firing schedule. So 1675 for 2 hours. And for something like this, since it has a flat bottom to the piece, it's fine just on a flat hard ceramic kiln shelf.
Karen, I love them. I keep going back and forth between, oh, now I like the bead setting. Oh, wait, now I like the flush setting. The beads do finish it off very pretty, whether it's side by side or all four sides.
And it's such a simple project. You can make a whole bunch of them and stack them up and swap them out.
Oh, it's great. It's great. Thank you very much for showing us that.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to share.